Cool. So, name's Ashley Benigno, Fjord Milan, and what we're looking at today really is three things. We want to talk about what's happening in digital, and then humans and the role that they're playing within this new digital landscape, and then a few pointers on, well, what it can maybe help to take win in this new world. So to start on with what's happening in digital, one realization that we had in the last year or two is I think that now we can make nearly anything we can imagine. And really this came out and we started mapping it to a few old films and books and stuff, and to see how in reality in these last 20, 30 years things have changed really dramatically. So for people who are old enough like me, they will remember Star Wars in the late 70s, and this was highly futuristic and sci-fi as the word was used. But hey, these days drones are now becoming commonplace and being used more and more. And again, it seems like something from a distant future. And similarly, robotics is becoming more and more accepted and commonplace that we're seeing. And if we quote another film, this from kind of early 80s, Knight Rider, you might remember, and it was this kind of super intelligent and smart car. Well, there we go. Kind of Nissan these days is bringing out similarly a car that you can control remotely from your phone. And hey, just like in Knight Rider, you can be dialing in, and if it's semi-autonomous, it will kind of meet you from where you're going. And to be actually quite recent, I'm a favorite of mine at least, but this was just 4 years ago, and with her, and of course the voice of Scarlett Johansson, I think, played a part in it. But nevertheless, what happens when we start falling in love, like in this case, with our operating systems? And there, as of last year, Alexa launches from Amazon. So this is voice controlled, and it's an OS that kind of answers and speaks to you. And we're not just seeing Amazon doing something of this kind. At the end of the day, all the big digital players that are coming out of California, you have Cortana from Microsoft, Siri from Apple, there's Google now. So there's from chatbots to elements like Cortana, where really we're starting to see a strong interaction with new devices that weren't there before. And I have little kids, and even there it's interesting to see how they play with something like Siri and the kind of philosophical questions that came out. Also of interest maybe is here, I think, the fact that they're all after women's names, so there could be a gender element that comes into play. That's not indifferent, but maybe that's for another conference. And then, we have our back in Bond times in the 60s, there were supervillains. This was Dr. No. And, well, we just seem to have our own Dr. No these days, too, in the form of Elon Musk. They've got strange accent, lots of money. And, hey, he's gone from, cars to wanting to colonize space. And the most recent piece there of a couple of weeks ago is a new venture of his where he's looking at neural implants so that we can then, if you want, morph a bit closer with a coming AI. So a lot of these things really are now on our doorstep, and they're happening. And this is a quote from one of the editors of The Economist. It goes back a couple of years, but I think it's really important. It's saying the pace of change will never again be as slow as it is today. And this is even quite a scary thought, because in the last 20 years or so, pace of change has already been quite fast, but we're thinking there's going to be this acceleration. And here to quote a colleague of mine from Fjord London, business design director Alex Jones, he's saying, it's faster to build than to plan. And essentially this was coming out of some of our client work where we're going very quickly into prototyping, and we're trying to just kind of really move fast on certain things while, of course, creating a longer term view of where things need to go. So really here, I think, what we're looking at is that, as I said, we can imagine most things and make them. And even importantly is I think people expect magic to be happening these days from their tools and their services. And as I said, with the speed of change, it really means there's a lot of things that we need to do and change on the way that we approach the way that we do our work and our design. And the reason one of these, and as you mentioned, of this kind of third wave of digital, is what we call the era of living services. And this is, as I said, we see it as a meta trend which is now driving the next few years. And what's happening is these living services are essentially the result of two things. On one side, what we have are the digitalization of everything. As we said, until now, our digital touch points were this, with this. You maybe have a watch, or something. But now we're starting to see really everything from what were known as very dumb objects. So I don't know, a fork that can actually pick up on the level of salt and sugar intake that you're eating, or something stupid like a door, and you have some hotels where I don't even need to check in anymore because I can actually use my phone when I get there and swipe that to use. But this means as designers that our touch points are increasing exponentially and becomes difficult maybe to understand how to best design coherently across these. And the second point is around what we're calling liquid expectations. And by liquid expectations, we mean that customers, but not only customers, you can be an employee, whatever role we play in life, our expectations are going beyond traditional boundaries. I have an example here which relates to banking. So in a near past, if I used one bank, I maybe compare it to another one. Or similarly, I flew in from Italy yesterday with LOT, so I can say, okay, they do certain things well, but British Airways or Alitalia may do things differently. What's happened, though, within a world that's becoming increasingly digitalized is our metric of comparisons are no longer just linked to that specific industry, because what happens is either like in the case of banking, where for the big guys at the top there, they now have a second row of competitors which are taking small parts of what they're doing, but actually giving a better experience around that. So if it can be from, Venmo that lets you transfer on Facebook, or, various other payment forms that are kind of eating into that world of banking. And thirdly, and as I said, then this really can affect all industries. What happens is because we mainly use digital channels. So if I go back to the idea of me flying into Warsaw, I did not speak to anybody. I got my ticket through my laptop, I downloaded an app, I did my check-in there, and I flew off. So at the moment now, if I compare that experience, I will compare it to the best in class in digital, be it Amazon or Airbnb or Facebook or whatever. So it means that when we design things, we really have to, as I said, look liquidly at what best experiences are out there. And this third wave, as we said, is I think we're really seeing our three chapters in digital. And going back, I began and got excited like other people in the mid-90s when the web came in and it made it accessible to non-technical people. And you're starting to see great potential in these tools. And some of the big names like Amazon just mentioned, or eBay, and then Google started coming out of this first era. And then we went into, the 2000s, and that's when mobility took off very much. And we're still very much in the heart of a mobility stage. This used to be called, a second screen or a third screen. It's now very much the first screen for most people. And look at desktop sales, and they're just like going that way. I mean, it's something from the past. So, but what we've entered now really are these living services, as we're saying, that mix a lot also of digitalization and what people call, Internet of Things, is bringing that and giving it kind of life. So the reason, in fact, that we call these living is that we should be looking at services, if you want, that are tailored around people, that are built around people, and that they can evolve and learn in time. So it means that if I have a future version of Nest, it should be able to recognize me, perhaps, and adapt temperature accordingly to mine, as opposed to, let's say, my kids come in and they're going to change based on that. So, and their proximity, as we're saying, they're real things that we wear or they're around our house, like Alexa can be. So really what they should do is help simplify on kind of low-grade decisions. We're mostly taken up in our day with having to decide those things, so these should try and take away some of those decisions from us. And then again, you know, disrupt instead of being reactive, but be proactive in the kind of services that get used. So it's kind of moving beyond utility into something that can be a service. And really, we're saying this is not so much industries anymore, but we need to think of environments. So it's our homes, it's our bodies, it's family, it's education. You know, you could continue, it's politics, etc. on this list. This really has implication that can impact very strongly. So, as we're saying, with this growing complexity, really, what we need to think is digital is no longer separate. You know, you go into companies and they have chief digital officers, but actually the line between digital and analog or physical is just blurring more and more. And of course, this leaves opportunities for transformation, as they say. So if we get onto the heart of what we were talking today, and humans, it's why bother with messy humans, you know? And if you've watched some of those videos that come out of the West Coast when they're presenting a new technology and it's happy, smiley families sitting around, and again, they're representing maybe they're white and it's traditional, etc., but it's all clean. It's all squeaky clean, and that's not the way we are as people, yeah? We have other things, good and bad, and how do we take that kind of sloppiness into play? And you know, we're needing to do, and that's what we're seeing, big challenges in digital. This list comes out of some of the projects that we have done and we're doing in Fjord. So, you know, it's things like, well, how do we reimagine a hotel experience for a new generation? Or how can we take a car maker and make them into service providers? Or, you know, help people grow their money if they have it, et cetera, really. But what we're seeing is that while we can use digital tools, actually these are human challenges. It's how do we approach these from a human perspective, and what does that bring in? And as part of Fjord, as some of you may know, we were acquired about 3.5 years ago from Accenture. So we're part of a large consultancy at the moment. And what this kind of gives us is a 360 view on projects, because if you see kind of traditionally in a consultancy, you would have had a business element where you're reorienting things, and then you have a technological aspect of, you know, shaping or flexing a platform. What we need, these do not go away, but what has been added and becomes more and more important is how do you delight people. So the experiential element of it becomes stronger and stronger. And if we look, so to quote our internal examples from Accenture, their tech vision that gets published each year, last year was very much dedicated to this idea of the primacy of people in a digital age and how we can reinterpret that. And some of the work that we have done at Fjord, where from Coles recently, I don't know, mobile commerce, it grew 800% in usage. We managed to move it again from a 1-star on the various app stores to 4.5. So again, take a bad experience and make it great. Or as we did with Hutchinson 3 in Sweden, this was very specific to a phone bill. So again, a transaction that normally doesn't get understood very well, and we turned it into kind of a real-time infographic that benefited end users by being able to understand what they were spending their money on, where their data was going, etc. But similarly, it benefited the company because one of the things is that actually calls to their call center dropped by 50%. And those were mainly driven by people not understanding something. Or BBVA, so going back a couple of years, but again, moved transactions from mobile from under 1% up to, as you can see, over 35% in 3 years. So, of course, this is both driven by design, but also changes in culture and the way that we act. But we're also seeing it that the market is saying certain things. So, interesting to see how design-driven companies are actually coming up with higher shareholder return than other SAP 500s that don't have design at their heart. Or, you know, a good old quote from Forrester that can never miss, really, but, you know, people are putting more and more their point on that experience. And we're seeing, if you want, from, you know, companies at the end of Gartner where customer experience has gone up to 89% of people seeing it as being primary in competition against kind of 36% 2 years ago. So there's massive changes happening out there, both for yourselves and your clients, towards how you can drive and help them achieve this. And if you think, you know, digital winners are experienced. Out of these 3 companies, 2 were founded by designers, were among their founders. So it's very much at the heart of what they're doing. So again, to just recap quickly, you know, having this kind of liquid expectations around us means that also it changes the way we react to things, and we can be very cheaper or easier to get to these magical experiences. And at the same time, I think you can achieve a sustainable differentiation, which just through pure technology becomes very difficult to achieve. So how do you become experience-led, or how do we put people at the center? So as we said, it's to be experience-led. First of all, so what does that mean, though, if I talk about being experience-led? Is mainly, as always, the biggest changes that need to happen are the ones that have to happen within our head and the way that we look at things. So one of them is, if you look, is we tend, from an Internet of Things world, we look at just what these things can do. So if a door is unlocked, you know, it will send me a message. But I don't know what to do with that message, and it may just maybe give me anxiety or panic if actually something hasn't happened, while maybe it should just alert the owner if someone else has walked in through the door and they're not home. Yeah, so how do you contextualize those problems, you know? Or if there's smoke, oh my God, I get notified on my alarm, I could be here thousands of miles away from my home. And I think, well, what's happening? So actually, again, put the people at the center and design in a way that maybe you know, or the kind of communication you're getting is, yes, you know, the nanny was burning something, and then, hey, everything's okay because the window got open. Or to the last example here, is not want to add complication to things by using the latest tool. In this case, you know, why have a mobile app to turn on and off your lights when I can just go and click a thing on the wall? It's quicker. Or why don't I have sensors that come in? So, and this often happens in work where people are technology focused. You know, we'll go into customers where they will ask for an app or a certain thing, and then the question is, well, why? Why do you use that? Maybe that's the starting point of not just going and building for building's sake. And the other aspect, which is, again, a big radical change, is customer loyalty. If you hear a lot of companies, you know, and to David's talk before, if you saw it, when he was talking about McDonald's, etc., he said, you know, that it's 50 to 1. It was kind of interesting statistic where 50%, you know, 50 times is spent on bringing new customers in, and then of that, you know, only 1%, you know, of it is actually on retaining customers. So again, there's always this focus of going, oh, it's you're expecting, or clients expect their loyalty from customers, when actually, again, you need to turn that on its head and be loyal to customers in a way. So keep giving them services that actually are bringing some true benefits to them. The example that's used here was from some work we did with Turkcell, which is a Turkish mobile company. They were sponsoring a festival. And again, they didn't want to just leave it at pure sponsorship, but they wanted to be able to engage with their audience. Again, here a very difficult one being millennials. But again, so we kind of built a whole tool that was kind of helping them enhance their festival experience. And again, as you can read from here, we got, you know, out of 20,000 festival goers, kind of good 14,000, so 3/4 that downloaded this. And again, it led to kind of very consistent usage over time. And again, this is again due to, if you want, to service design of not just taking an app as a central thing, but the people. So going back to, as you probably all know, design methodologies of talking to people, researching, spending time with them, this is what then allows you to be able to design something that is in line with their needs. And this, if we want, is a massive question that's going to come up and is going to be impacting us more and more over coming years. You know, and it's about, well, do we replace employees with digital? And what's that? There was a question just now, again, from the previous session where they're asking, well, if this automizes more and more, what happens? So again, it's saying, well, how do we turn this on its head? And as jobs do change, how do you help change those jobs and also empower people that are doing them with digital tools? So again, here, this was from Telstra. It's an Australian telco company. And what we did, there was a big fragmentation within that, and essentially it was helping all their frontline staff to come together and have a tool that was making their life easier in what they needed to do. And I mentioned, I think, this one before in one of my examples, which was around this idea of moving from transaction to service. This was a very simple one, if you want, of bringing, as I said, your phone bill to life in a more understandable and comprehensible way. But similarly, this can be applied to most things. What I'm saying is any product you have is, again, a service waiting to be born. And more, if we look back to the experiential element, is how do you think wider on the things that you're building so that they kind of have the context within the situation they're happening in. And again, I think this is similar to the customer loyalty. You're expecting employees to bring stuff to the building, to your business. But again, things are changing a lot more, and especially maybe in younger generations where people are not looking for jobs for life anymore. Well, it's changing too fast. That's not going to happen. We call them tours of duty. You're looking for a new job because you're going to learn something out of it. You're going to get something out, and then maybe you move on. So again, as employers, if before it was like going, okay, now you're here, you've got to do, actually it's how we can treat our employees in a different way so that they remained engaged, and it's not just about the financial aspect, but it's about the learning, the community, the culture that comes with the places that we work in. And again, what we are seeing is moving away as Fjord is the complexity of a lot of our projects, where we are now looking at things like employee engagement or employee experience and helping, and especially if any of you have spent times also in large corporations, go on one of their intranets and it's like being back in 1994. So going back to liquid expectations, I am also wanting tools on my work that I expect in my kind of consumer life to happen. And then, again, there's a point here which links to optimizing in silos, and the idea of silos, that things are kind of obviously not talking to each other. They're vertical, they're in their own little silos. I can't think of another English word for it. But this happens a lot in a lot of companies, and what we're finding, again, that as a byproduct of working together and using design tools where we bring, yes, the voice of the user or the customer or the employee, but also of the stakeholders involved in this, be it top management, be it frontline staff, be it partners, whoever, it helps break down these silos, both internally. So again, we're seeing that when we bring, business, marketing, IT, etc., together in a workshop and playing with tools that are different from their day-to-day life, beyond maybe developing a concept for a new mobile strategy or whatever it is, what it does help is actually create conversations between the stakeholders in a company and have a single vision towards which to move. And here again is to make these design, as I said, for conversations is some work we did with Harvard Medical School. And normally, as you can imagine, this was for pediatricians, the language is very technical, it's very specialized. You've studied, of course, to be a doctor for years, so it's not going to be easy as a non-doctor to understand. And yet you're communicating and talking to parents of kids who have a need to understand simply and clearly, any potential problems or not. So again, what we did here was a way, again, using infographics, of being able to help a pediatrician not only then use his or her tools in what they're doing, but help communicate to the parents of these children in a way that was effective and simple and for them to understand, and where we're bringing things in. And so to end again, there's a lot of talk around minimal viable products that you have seen coming out, and it's a kind of there, and that just kind of tends to, bottom out at a feasibility level down there. And it's again a way of quickly getting out to market, but what that means is that you're missing kind of the other elements that need to be coming in, an element of usability, of value and write-up. As I said, we speak about delightful a lot, but the tools we do need to delight us. So what we're trying to do as we push and on the work that we do is actually is build what we're calling minimal lovable products, so that they can manage to touch on all 4 of those elements, while of course leaving a space to then bring that service to life fully as we move on. So again, why be experience-led? Just to, oh, this is the same as the slide before, but the social nature I think is interesting here of digital, is how you scale to a human thing essentially. And again, how can we try that to build differentiation which is sustainable towards our competitors and towards the people that come and work for us. So the second point of this is about being nimble and flexible. So nimble means, being able to move fast and with ease, and also flexible in being able to change and adapt based on the things that you learn across the way. So no more kind of long-term waterfall effect, but actually be very hands-on. And the way to do this often is to kind of start small. I mean, classic example here comes out of Uber, who took a local problem in San Francisco's with cabs, reinvented it, and in the same time kind of created a service that could be then applied globally as it is. Again, Uber's had a few problems recently. Again, that's a different matter, but this also shows how old ways of thinking impact on new services. And going back to your employee experience, it doesn't sound like Uber's is too good towards theirs, but it's how do we break down, again, these elements. And then it's about taking risks, and this is a very difficult question, thing to convince a client about, that you need to take risks in our days because it's new worlds that need imagining. So we will design at times services like that BBVA, which was a concept for a bank for kids. It never saw the light. But again, it gave a lot of learnings on a wider collaboration that we had that then got used similarly in other things. And the Banca Sabadell, while is looking again at objects within the house, kind of Alexa-like, that can obviously then be giving you banking services. As everything, it means that there's an element of risk. This may or may not work. And again, it's learning from a lot of the digital giants. I mean, take Google with Google Glass and where that's gone. But probably elements will be coming and resurfacing out of those lessons that were learned. And then, good old customer journey here. But, it's about breaking down, as I said, those internal barriers. And again, the tools that we can bring as designers are very effective to this way. So whenever we're planning, like here, be it with a customer journey or a blueprint, if you're looking both front stage and backstage of what you're doing, are tools that are very effective, again, within organization, and keeping that common vision and seeing how all the component parts really go together on this. So, why be nimble and flexible? Of course, we're saying it's speed to market. This means, and again, it becomes more and more important. There's opportunities there that may transcend your natural barriers and boundaries. And again, this is reinstating it, but it's something that needs to be said. Digital is not separate. Digital is very much integrated into our life. And thirdly, on this, we're talking about connecting your assets and what you may bring. So, you start with what you have. We did a job with Argos, which kind of sells domestic appliances, TVs, etc. And what they had, if you want, beyond Amazon, were a whole retail network of retail stores that we could use, and we're giving them an advantage, a physical advantage over that. Or similarly, a lot of things that, I can't remember, the coffee. Digital leaders go beyond digital. I think this is very interesting too at the moment, of how, you'll have a thesis and antithesis, and then things tend to synthesize and move forward. So a lot of pure players like Amazon, we would have never maybe imagined in physical spaces. And yet they are now using those and reinterpreting them, both by opening kind of selected bookshops, but act differently from kind of old school ones, so that they're more an element of curation or a way of showing and giving an experience of what they're offering. Or there's a startup that have been doing glasses, Warby Parker, initially were online, and again, they have been moving into the physical space. So again, there's not this feel that everything needs to be forgotten that exists, because at the end of the day, as humans, that's very much the space that we inhabit. And then lastly of these, I think there was an element around making the invisible visible. It's what we call the visibility paradox these days, of how more and more things that we could not see before, actually we can give them visibility. Be it again the example there from 3 on your bill, or it can be, you know, feedback that's giving you feedback on your physical exercise. Again, there wasn't elements there before on knowing, you know, how often I walk or sleep, etc., etc. So the invisibility of these things become very visible, and you can also say that the contrary is happening. Things that were before visible to do are becoming invisible. So the fact that you no longer need to, you know, type something in, but you can just say it, changes the way you relate to those elements. So why connect through various assets is saying, you know, value is created through ecosystems these days, so you need to be looking at the role that you're playing within an ecosystem. And again, this idea that elements that were dumb, that were stupid before, now by acquiring a smartness are actually joining this network and becoming, again, all further touch points within it. And as I said, this invisibility paradox is very much happening. And lastly, you know, the killer combination really towards thing is taking digital tools and applying it with kind of human smartness is what gives, if you want, a great combo there. So those 3 elements again are around being experience-led, being nimble and flexible, and connect your assets. So as my last 2 slides really to remind, you know, you have magical powers, incredibly. Yeah? It's difficult at times to bring them out, but they're there. And there is opportunity for transformation. It's happening everywhere. And if we don't grab it, someone else will. And again, you know, it's faster at time to build and prototype and iterate and try than actually go for long-term planning before kicking things off in reality. So what we think as kind of steps towards this is, you know, you can digitize your existing processes and experience, you know, and let machine do things that are easy to do at the end of the day, you know. And at the same time, while the machines are doing easy things, well, use that digital to enable your workforce to have, let's say, superpowers in what they're doing that they may have not had before. And again, this digital world can give us, if you want, the possibility to have new propositions and new values coming into place. And as we spoke of humans at the start, it's always saying, you know, start and end with people's needs. Whatever we want to call them, it's a consumer, citizen, employee, patient, whatever. It doesn't matter. Have those at the center of what you're doing. So thank you. And I think to your timing, that leaves...
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let me check the time. We have 8 minutes. So probably like 3 questions, if you have any. Oh, I'm sure you do have.
Oh, people gearing up for the after party.
Hi, I'm Eric from LiveWork. Thank you for your presentation, really nice. I was curious about your minimum lovable product. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and what it means in practice? For example, how do you know what's like minimum lovable? How can you sort of scale that, or where do you stop in terms of lovability?
So on the lovability aspect, as I said, what we developed over the last year or so, and it was a big piece of work that we did together with Accenture, is called like the Love Index. And it's a new generation, if you want, way of measuring kind of brand preference that takes into mind kind of a lot more of the digital experience and those elements, and kind of what we mapped, and it was a research done in Brazil, US, and UK, and it touched across kind of about 6 or 7 major industries, from automotive to retail to banking. And what came out, and then we also had a look at what the main brands that are loved by the people we touch. So as Fjord, we did qualitative research. Accenture came in with the big kind of quantitative machine. So we were seeing that, you know, if your major brands are all digital at the moment in kind of people's hearts in these 3 countries. I think US had Walmart as the only one, but you can imagine, I think, the kind of importance that may have in people's lives. And then we mapped, if you want, 3 or 5 elements that were coming into play, which we kind of acronized as FRESH, which essentially was around fun, relevant, engaging, social, and helpful. And obviously based on you know, the kind of industry that that was in, there could be indications. But say something like, I don't know, the hotel business. What we were seeing, that should be, unless you're traveling for work maybe at times, it should be a very pleasurable experience. You're on holiday, you're going to do things. And yet, the fun element, when we mapped it, was not as high as you would expect for something of the kind. So by using those kind of tools, it can give us indications on what that minimal element needs to be. And the other aspect is simply, again, not to take the technology as the kind of central point, but people's needs that then, if they can answer to that and build out.
Thank you. Let me see your hands.
Hello. I'm
Hi.
just a simple developer, so I have just a simple question, because I understand you are from Italy.
Yeah.
And I just know from the design that Italy has always exceptional design. It was always in Italy, I don't know, ships, planes that are just beautiful. So I just wonder how much Italy is in your work and in your design.
So, as always, simple questions are really difficult, yeah? I mean, but you're very right in saying Italy comes from a very strong design heritage, and a lot of that has come from industrial design, and, you know, be it from cars to furniture, fashion, etc. What is happening, I think, actually, and to me is a big opportunity, seeing that in a digital space, this is not happening. So there is no leadership of it. So if anything, at times, I think we need to look at the past to try and regain certain things that could be applied to the future. So personally, one of my reasons going back to Italy was exactly that. It's digitally behind. It's saying, how in my little bit can I help, you know, maybe take some of its digital culture and make it relevant for today. Don't know how it'll go.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Flaminia, as well from Livework Studio, and actually I'm Italian. So I'm really curious to know, how do you feel about the future of service design and technology in Italy, working there now?
So with service design, I still feel that there's some work to be done to educate people on what it means. So again, often, I was just mentioning, if you want, let's say I won't say the name, a very famous luxury car maker. We had a pitch, we didn't win at the end, but they began by saying, okay, well, we need an app. And maybe, as I said, the group of these collectors of these cars may have been a 70-year-old in Japan or whatever, which is not because of his age, but it's like saying, well, do you actually need that or not? So again, it's bringing questions to the table of going, let's understand before we just go out and bring something to life. But there's a lot of movement happening in Italy at the moment. So so we'll see. Hopefully things will improve.
Okay. I actually have a question that is connected with yours. Because Fjord is a global consultancy firm, so is your approach in case of design, in case of solving problems, different in studios, like, you know, globally, different approach in each studio?
Not really. I mean, there may be local flavors to how we do things, but we have very strong methodologies, and
and it's global. And it's the same methodology and
yes.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have an internal, let's say, academy that supports us and keeps that moving. We also have, I mean, like most design studios, we favor a diverse bunch of people. In Milan, there's 20 plus of us, and there's 11 nationalities. So that already helps bring that to life. And in Fjord now, we have about 23 or 24 studios. And we work quite closely. And actually, now that we're seeing projects become more regional in scope, I will bring people in from maybe Berlin or Madrid or wherever that will join some of our projects, and vice versa. People from my team will travel out to other studios and participate. So we kind of cross-pollinate that a lot that way.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm not going to ask about the Accenture. I know that it's now it's great to work with them.
It's as I said, there's an interesting element because it brings two different cultures together. So if any of you work with a traditional consultancy versus kind of design thinking ways, so there's elements of tension, but if you can turn that tension into positivity, then it's bringing great results. And I think what makes it really interesting is that it means that the work that we are doing as designers, we can also follow end to end, which as an independent studio, we wouldn't have been able to do. And it means that we're now at the heart of very large digital transformation projects, and having the kind of might that means, I was telling you earlier, yeah, of mapping kind of technological roadmaps to the kind of concept scene that we're doing and bringing, you know, kind of business angles in, etc. So it creates a nice kind of comprehensive package.
Aren't you sometimes competing or fighting with Accenture's strategic department or strategic, yeah.
No.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, one more question here.
Hi, I'm Simon. Basically, a question on your methodology. A lot of what you were showing and briefly describing brings to my mind jobs to be done framework, and I'm wondering if you ever used it formally. And
Which framework?
Jobs to be done, Christensen's or Strategies framework. I'm pretty sure you should be familiar with it.
I'm not.
No, you're not? Okay. Okay.
Always admit to my ignorance.
Okay,
but
so
no,
maybe we
I'll
can
have to
talk
look
about
it
it at an after party. Basically, the key concepts are in line
But
with what you
I
were saying.
imagine that some of the tools could be quite similar in that.
Yeah,
way,
yeah, yeah. So basically, very, very human-centered.
yeah. So I mean,
Okay, so you haven't used it.
Hmm?
Can you tell us in brief what
Yeah,
your methodology looks like?
Yeah. So the way we kick off with a discover phase, we call it. So that's our research phase, and we don't have researchers as I mean, we use our same team that's working on something. We'll follow all the steps. So normally we'll have, I don't know, in a classic one, a service design lead who obviously leads the project with a couple of interaction and visual designers, and they will do the research. Or research, as I said, will involve a lot of element of field work. So there's one-to-one interviews, both with kind of users and stakeholders. We do shadowing in places. So if you're saying we're working with bank, we'll spend time in their branches to see how that work, or we'll sit in on a call center for a couple of days. So a lot of kind of ethnographical tools. Once we kind of complete our discovery, we go into what we call a describe or envision phase. And that kind of tends to be the strategy, if you want, of the elements that come together, where we start, you know, bringing to life, I don't know, their customer journey as is. We're highlighting pain and PowerPoints on that. We're mapping it emotionally with a graph to understand it's based on all the different channels. The channels can be digital, but they can be physical. It can be an agent, just as it can be, an app. And based on all that, we will take that into maybe a customer journey to be, and we'll start linking kind of concepts to it. From that, we will kind of bring out a North Star. So what is the vision for what we're looking to do? And, you know, design pillars based on, okay, this service needs to be, I don't know, contextual, proactive, etc. So we have our building blocks all there, and that gets shared, and then we will take it into a design phase, which begins normally with us at kind of high-level concepting. It can start, it will normally end maybe with key screens on something, and then we will go into detailed design, and depending on, I think it depends on a project. Sometimes people will take it over at that element, or we follow it through, and then ideally work with developers to kind of close the loop.
Is it happening that the research phase is longer in time than the actual design phase?
They can be quite similar. I mean, it depends. We do projects, and again, there's a need for speed that's happening more and more. But anything from 8 to 15 weeks is probably quite classical. I mean, sometimes they just come off a 6-month project, but no, they tend to map, and we very much try and get. And it's important to sell that research in. I mean, most companies will come and they've done MPS, or they've got their Nielsen, and they've got a lot of kind of marketing material, which is great because it's beyond, let's say, doing field research. We also do desk research, of course, and we use our trends for reframing, but there's a need. Yeah, sorry, I forgot where I was going.
one more, but that's the last one, sorry.
Yeah, you told us in general how the process looks like, but could you give one example of the most challenging project in terms of like human digital relation that you were involved in? And there's the second part to this question, whether it's more because we are working in this field, were you ever did you ever had a project that was related to voice recognition and this field? Because this is quite new when it comes to the product design, and I was wondering whether you had any experience there.
So to the first part, most projects, one way or the other, tend to be challenging. I think the main element of challenge is, again, the human element. So it's ensuring that you have comprehension of the things that you're talking about. So when people say, you know, experience design, customer journey, what do you mean? So it's first of all is establishing a common language with people. And again, you know, especially in large organizations, and as you see, we tend to work with large ones, there is an element of politics, which is not indifferent. So there's a lot of having to, let's say, soft skill design in bringing people together and ensuring that different places, so that tends to be a recurring challenge that appears. While with voice recognition or voice things, that's actually interesting question, because we're kicking off some research and some work on that on a moment of going, well, what happens, you know, on voice design, essentially. Unfortunately, I'm on a plane back to Milan, but we'll maybe back next year to talk about what we're doing in voice.
Thank you very much. I hope you're going to come again.
Thank you. Awesome.